Planning Commission meeting on 12/6/23. Time is 6:32 p.m. Any agenda additions or changes to be made tonight? No? All right. Any comments from the public on items not on the agenda? There's no one here. I see. Oh. Do you see anyone else on the meeting?
There's nobody else.
Nobody on the meeting?
The
Online. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to the minutes from November 9th. We need a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Right. Any discussion on the minutes from November 9th?
Oh, they look good.
A couple of typos, but no big deal.
All right.
Well, there's no critical.
All in favor of approving the minutes from November 9th as written, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Moving on to the business items. So first is the Act 47 Affordable Housing Verification Procedures.
All right. So we'll throw up what we have on the screen in case that's easier.
Yep.
But I think I mentioned this briefly last time, but we weren't able to show you the details. But Act 47 has the allowance for one bonus story if you meet affordable housing requirements. And we have included that in the LDC. Like, technically it wasn't mandatory for municipalities to adopt until the end of 2024, but we were already changing the LDC, so we just did it. But it wasn't. It's not specified how municipalities are supposed to confirm and verify that these units are meeting affordability requirements. So we came up with a method. We talked with the city of Burlington to see how they administer their inclusionary zoning, which this is kind of a state-led initiative, but it's still inclusionary zoning. And we adapted that to something that we think would work. Something different about this versus Burlington's is that there's no income qualification requirements for our for the affordable to meet the affordable housing requirements under Act 47. So that makes it a little simpler. Basically, if you're under a certain price, if you rent your property for under a certain price, inclusive of utilities and fees, then you're good. And that's based on household size. But household size is a little bit difficult to determine sometimes. So it seems like the other municipalities do a conversion. They convert household size to number of bedrooms based on HUD guidelines. So we're thinking of doing the same thing, unless it is unless the landlord proves differently. This is kind of the default position. Do you have any questions about what you've seen in the packet, in the draft that we put out there?
The other question I have is on page. It says unit number of bedrooms for rent. Oh, it's telling me it's like page 10. So it says pass fail affordability requirements.
Yeah.
So
So that's
can you
screenshot.
flesh out a little bit for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe just a little background though. Like this is actually not meant to be public facing. Like this is a spreadsheet that staff would be using to check that something meets requirements. But in basically, if you are going to be showing what utilities you're actually you're actually providing, there's a point at which something obviously meets the requirements, and there's a point at which they obviously don't. But then there's also like a gray area where we would have to verify further in terms of cost. But Jennifer, you will just speak more.
Yeah, you covered it pretty well, but this is a spreadsheet I put together because depending on which utilities are included and what type of utilities, they're all priced differently. We use the Vermont, what was it, Fair Housing had or not Fair Housing, but there was some Vermont agency that had estimated cost of different utilities, and we use that as go by for the prices of those. So that spreadsheet is something that we would use to verify. The landlord says that they're providing these utilities. They're saying that they're listing it at this rent, and it will automatically update and show whether that unit passes or fails those affordability guidelines as programmed and set up. And it's also set up in such a way that we can update it annually with all the new AMI every year, the area median income, as that changes, and we can update that and it'll automatically update everywhere else.
So what happens if, so in this case, the ones in red are the ones that exceed the 80% median income, 30% factor, right?
Right.
So what happens if it fails?
So in that case, we would turn around, inform the landlord that many units failed, and we could show them, I guess, the numbers, or we could tell them what that specific maximum is, like, well, according to, all these different inputs, this is the maximum that you have to be below. And then they would have to adjust their rent.
Well, so I think, yeah.
Or utilities.
Yeah, or utilities.
Right. I think that is a situation that is best avoided. I think we've provided clarity on the first, on the information page. I think what we want people to be most cognizant of is, like landlords who qualify for this, is the total rent inclusive. The utility inclusive rents that is allowed. So they can work back from there, and we have provided resources on the page after that, about the typical allowances for utilities that the Vermont Housing Authority uses. So there should be no surprises in theory, and if they come to us and show that they're a little bit over, they're gonna have to refund like somebody's getting a refund if they want to keep their status.
Yeah. So the other question is, this is for new developments, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this doesn't apply to existing landlords.
No.
Could they apply for that, though?
Well, okay. Existing
Well-
land. If they come back to the DRE for a change of their building, but yeah, are you thinking about a specific?
What I'm thinking here is, we talked about incentive programs. Okay, so this is an incentive program to include X% of your housing as affordable housing when you come into DRB with a plan, right? Okay, so I'm looking at existing landlords and whether or not there's no incentive for an existing landlord to do this.
No.
Absolutely none right now. The question is, could there be an incentive for an existing landlord to do? And it's an open-ended question. I don't have an answer. I'm trying to link it back now to the discussion we've had about the rental register.
This is that, I don't know of any landlord, okay, that would suddenly want to stick another floor on already.
No, existing, exactly.
Existing building. Now, if there were others that were putting up new building, as I understand, there's possible on Tuesday the 19th, they have an application that's going to do exactly this, so it's timely, okay, to have this, and whatnot. So, you know, but I don't see it anybody that, unless somebody's putting some new construction, it's not, there's nothing, you know, there's no programs to say, you know, we'll give you some credits if you ratchet it affordable housing.
Yeah, no, the reason I'm asking it is, I'm looking at the space of Essex Junction and our zones, so on, and looking at places available for 4-story plus buildings. And we have limited space for that, quite honestly. You know, behind Domino's and all that place over there, you know, existing places to put up a 4-story plus building are limited. So in terms of people who already have housing rental units, there's no incentive here for anybody to decrease their rent. If it's 35-45% of the renter's income, there's no incentive. Correct.
Not out of, I mean, we don't
Not
have a
from there.
municipal program for that.
Yeah.
It is, I think there are, you know, state and there are federal programs that you could qualify for after the fact, and like tax incentives and but I'm not sure about the details of those, and also those are not administered by us.
Yeah, okay, just.
I have kind of, it's not related, it's sort of related, but my question is more of like what sort of teeth does the city have to continue to enforce this? Because I mean, I know it's a state law and like we have to do it anyway, and we already implemented it into our LDC, but my thinking is like kind of what you're getting at. This applies when you're building the building, and you generally don't have leases yet until the building's built. So you're saying you're going to do this, and then we have to check that you are doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But what stops landlords from just not doing it? Now they've got a whole floor.
Right. So this would be we would be recommending this as a condition of approval for the site plans, and what that means is if the conditions are not met after the fact, you know, within the 15-year applicability period, they would no longer be in, you know, their approval would no longer be valid. It would be an illegal building. So it would be like the building would have an extra illegal floor, basically. Our options at that point would be, you know, it would be through our zoning enforcement process and a notice of violation and fines that in theory could you know be a daily fine of I think it's like up to $500. So, and you know, there's lots of legal wrangling involved if we ever have to get to that. I don't anticipate we'll have to. This is, you know, like this is for the same reason we have been able to have to keep a handle on buildings that have already been built and them not falling outrageously into, you know, out of compliance. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
there's more. Just in addition, they'd have to. Did you talk about the legal thing they have to sign?
Right. So, okay, yeah. The other requirement is that they have to put it on their deed that the affordability requirements would be maintained for the 15 years, even if they sell. So the next person who owns it would still be subject to it. I think there's another factor to why I think I don't anticipate there being major compliance issues with this. The type of developer that can qualify for this, they're relatively big, and they all do multiple projects, and you know, they need to maintain good standing in order to continue to operate here.
So.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you?
Oh, yeah. I was just gonna say. I mean, personally, I don't really think it's gonna happen either. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate, and I know as far as my understanding, we still have an illegal building in the
You know,
city.
it's kind of coming to mind.
And
could that slightly elevated building, say, by the way, I'm willing to do, the 5 units, and then make themselves into good graces, because we have some out of compliance lots right now that are grandfathered, that, it's kind of like saying, hey, this is how you'd be getting out of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
out of compliance. And could that individual put together this? Sure.
Yeah.
And they, they could petition to
So
change, I guess, under the new law.
I mean, I understand like our mechanism is to cite them and keep them out of compliance. It gets really hairy when it's involving residents and people's homes, and it gets into bad areas. And so I think we can hope that this doesn't happen. But I was just playing devil's advocate with like, oh, you're enforcing something that's done once the building is already built that you approved for.
So to be clear, if you're referring to 197 Pearl with what looks like the fifth story, the final product is that is not a real story, because it is not. It
I
was
wasn't
blocked off.
referring
And
to that building.
I
I'm
see.
aware of that. I'm referring to the Railroad and Main building
oh yes,
over here.
right,
The design compliance,
right.
which I'm not clear with where that's ended or if it's ended.
I think it's ended.
Yeah, I don't think it's ended either. So
Yeah, I don't have more on that at this time.
yeah,
My other question is, so once this is in effect, essentially, would it be your office or would it be the DRB that sets a target or talks to developers during the site plan process? Would you have a goal for a particular year, for example, and how would you ensure that developers and so on would know about it? Or when they come in with the site plan, would you instruct them then, or what? How would it work? Do you see that?
Well, we see developers are already looking to implement this. We've seen in the conceptual site plans that have come into our office that they want to use this bonus. So that's why we were actually in a rush to put together the procedures for it. I think we would definitely. We always try to make sure everyone knows what the rules are before before they go too far into their development process. Anybody that comes in to just chat about their ideas for the next phase of development of anything, we tell them what pertinent rules they should be paying attention to, and this is one of them. In terms of the DRB's role in this, the DRB would have to. We would be recommending that the DRB include the reporting requirements as a condition of approval. In terms of like the maximum rents and number of units and stuff, that's already. That's just set by statute.
But I'm assuming that this is something that we want to publicize. And
Right,
this is
right. This would be on.
objective of the city to include as many affordable housing units as possible.
I would planning to put this on the internet after when it's final. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the mechanism for figuring out if they qualify makes sense. What you've developed here. I'm curious about the rent amounts. So you said Burlington does something similar, or other communities are doing something similar, where they've taken the household size and somehow made a rent amount out of that.
Yes. And it was also on HUD's guidelines as well, if
Yeah.
I remember correctly. And HUD's recommendation is for calculating the number of bedrooms, studio estimate one person. And then from there on, one bedroom and up, it is estimated at 1.5 people, like 1.5 occupants per bedroom. So it's calculated based on that.
It's in the footnotes under.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the 30% is from the
statute.
Yeah.
from the statute. Oh, that's actually in Act 47?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes, Act 47 refers to actually an existing definition of affordable housing developments and affordable housing. And basically, affordable housing developments have to have 20% of their units or more meet being affordable units, and the affordable units are defined as something that doesn't that costs someone no more a household no more than 30% of their annual household income. For a household at 80% of the area median income.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
And then it does have qualifiers for the area median income. You can either use the area median income of the town, the county, or the what is it?
State.
It's not for the state, is it?
Oh no, there's no you.
It's like
There's a
for
state
the
as well. It's like
extended-
you take the highest one.
Yeah, but you have to take the highest one. And for us, that was Chittenden County area median income was the highest value.
Yep.
So that's what we have to use.
I think the interesting thing in terms of the cost is that because the limits are set at the county level, basically, like it works better for developers in Essex Junction than it does in Burlington, because the price of the price of everything is higher there, but we have the same limit, so yeah. Any other questions about this?
No? What do you need from us?
We don't need anything. This is an information item.
Okay.
Or if you have if you notice anything with it, because it's a draft, we have the opportunity to adjust and fix things if you.
And the opportunity to discuss things devil's advocate style. And, no, it's helpful because we want to make sure that we have effective guardrails in place, that we're trying our best to make sure that people comply with these rules and that we can, hold people accountable. So yeah, anything you guys want to mention or point out?
Well, the only comment I have is based upon the comment that came up at the council meeting from the woman who talked about the affordability of housing, which is trying to figure out some way to incentivize landlords to decrease rents.
Yeah.
That's a complicated statement, but
I guess another question I just thought of is, obviously we have minimums that we have to meet for this. Can the city go beyond those
So
to make it more affordable?
you sort of. So we can have higher standards, but we still have to honor the requirements of the state. So basically, we could have higher standards and offer an additional floor, but we cannot be like we cannot not give someone the additional floor, the single additional floor, if they meet the state's requirements, because we want higher,
That makes sense.
something higher.
So kind of along those lines, and this may be obvious, so excuse me if it's a stupid question, but in terms of the 15-year, this will be in effect for 15 years. Do we have any ability to extend that? And the idea being, obviously, that when this develops, it's hopefully going to last more than 15 years. Are there some anecdotal cases where, out of the goodness of their heart, landlords choose to continue offering those units as affordable? Is that hoped for by the city, or is that, or just because we do have a very limited space where we can build this type of development, and we haven't exhausted it yet. But given the limitations we currently have, I don't know. I'm just curious. Is there a way, since we are talking about both lack of housing and a lack of affordable housing, and this is very much a long-term issue, is there any, I don't know, do we have any mechanisms to ensure the affordability, or a certain proportion of affordability housing, or at least attempt to, for more than a 15-year window?
So I'm not aware of a method for doing that without stepping on the limits of what state statute requires. Because the state statute says you must, the municipalities must offer this height bonus if you meet this standard. The standard is 15 years. If we raise that to 30, that's a higher standard.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's in our right to say no when to someone who wants to offer the affordability for 15 years and then jack up the rents. But having said that, I anticipate there might be more guidance from the states on this in the upcoming year as more municipalities adopt it. Are there other mechanisms for trying to encourage affordability and the maintenance of affordability? Possibly. There's also, we also see some older housing stock just tends to be more affordable. That's like as buildings age, there's the rents within the existing buildings don't tend to climb as fast as a new building that pops up. And that's a truism we can hope on, but it's not something we can enforce, at least not based on this.
I think that's a good point, but also worth noticing that with the rental registry and inspection program, we're introducing a mechanism to make sure those older stock units are kept up,
Right.
and improved on. So just thinking about that we are introducing that to make sure that those are upkept, which in theory would increase the
Which we heard from the public, the
the,
concern about if you do this, rents are going to go up. And then-
Well, and it keeps coming back to this thing about, and it's not related to this, but what are the incentives for existing stock landlords to maintain affordability? Especially if they have to if they have to improve their facilities based upon health standards or other standards.
Well, there's always the incentive that, when life was better, I should say, for renters, is that there was always a competition of what landlord was out there to attract renters. Right now, of course, it's a landlord's market, it's not renters market. So I think the hope here is that there's more incentive to have more units, and maybe it might make it more of an even feel than, being a little less lopsided. If there's more competition, of course, we want to continue to have renters, I would think, while you're renting in the first place, for some kind of monetary income. So I would think that people would want to maintain their properties, as opposed to just trying to get every red cent out of it and drain it to the point where it's no longer. But this is, I guess, a means of getting more housing out there, which is, of course, desperately needed.
Yep. By the way, just an aside, there's an interesting article in 7 Days about evictions.
Yeah, so
Pick it up and
It's pretty disturbing.
yeah.
Yeah.
anything else on this topic?
No, good job, guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Moving on to sign content neutrality. Exciting stuff.
Yeah, all 75 pages.
So I have been directed by the city manager to prioritize this a new round of land development code amendments to fix this issue. So sign content neutrality. This is some of what we have in the land development code right now is known to be unconstitutional. It needs to be updated to be constitutional, and we are not allowed to regulate signs differently based on content. So this was something that Regina was planning on doing in the couple of years ago when the CCRPC worked with the village at the time to make the amendments, but they ran out of time. But right now we are running, we're running into issues with the enforcement of the existing rules. It's rather difficult to enforce something that where parts of it are we have to ignore. So looking at what in terms of like the most, I think the easiest way to do this, in my opinion, is not to fix each individual problem with our with the sign regulations that we have, but just to replace them altogether. I think this is, to a certain extent, signs are similar in different cities, and if somebody else has really thought through it, I think we should take advantage of the work that they've already done, and adapt it as needed. So that's yeah. I mean, it'd be good to hear from you if you agree that that's a good approach. And I've also included the two examples, one from Burlington, one from Manchester, that we can consider, and those are both recent and certainly a compliance with the content neutrality requirements.
Well, I read through the sections, and yes, there's some parts of both that I really like. And yes, I could see how, as I was looking at pieces and trying to go with how could various pieces, like, we cut and paste, and it's like, no, not really. It's kind of like, especially looking at the exemptions and whatnot, going, yeah, some of the problem things are where we talked about how we're going to exempt something or exclude something. So I agree with you that it might be better to just say, what do we like best in this or there? I mean, I know that right now I like having some of the charts, some of the tables and whatnot, as to, somebody says, here's a picture, and we can say, this is what we're looking at. This is how we're defining it. I don't have to do the words. Here's a picture. This is what we're talking. Like, like these sign things. The fact that it was kind of like looking at the real estate thing. Like, yeah, there's that real estate thing. Yeah, the real estate piece is, why do we have to debate it? It's right there. They did an excellent job of defining what it is. The other part was the election signs. I mean, that's always been a bugaboo about how long can they be there? How big can they be?
So
yeah, well, we went years ago, before either of you being here, there was someone that wanted to put what essentially would, in our terminology, would be a billboard, and because it was huge by our standards, and but because it was a short-term sign, it wouldn't meet that it was bigger than that. Okay.
Right.
It took up someone's entire front yard here in the time in the village. So yeah, it was immense, and totally out of place. But if it had been out by the interstate, we probably would have qualified as a billboard. But I looked at, like, in this case with Burlington's signs and whatnot. It's like those pieces where you get highlighted and like, yeah, okay, slap this puppy in and we're good to go. And that'll define things. I mean, it's very clear to the person who's going to be putting up a sign or having to watch for a sign or whatever. It says how long you can be there, how long can it, how long, when does it have to go? That's the big part, is that the lawn signs for elections seem to hang in there because somebody doesn't come pick them up.
So yeah, and interesting to note, the election sign regulations that we have are unconstitutional because they are treating election signs differently from other signs. But notice this is it's an election period sign.
Yes.
You can put
Yes.
any sign up if it during the election period, if it if it meets the size and location and timing requirements. But that it should cover it. Like election periods aren't for that long, so and construction site, this is saying you can put up whatever sign you want, but you can only put it up under if it is a construction site and if it's construction is going
I mean,
on.
I could see how
Yeah.
somebody might be up there and saying, I'm doing somebody's front walk or whatever, and they want to put their sign that says, Joe Cement, and, with their, so that he gets credit for, and people go, ooh, ah, and get, and whatever. And it drives business to the Joe Cement because people thought that the recipes work. So I can understand that, and there it says, but on the other part, it's like, I guess it'd be nice, like, I was reading Burlington and going, yeah, the construct site wrap, I guess we haven't had any site wrap for a while. Probably about 5 or 10 years at this point in time, nice to have that there if somebody wants to put up what needs to do, and there it is. So congratulate Burlington on doing a wordsmithing wonder. That's my take on there.
So to be clear, what we're being asked is we're gonna have to go through, right, and adjust all of our
Correct. So
amendments. We're not making a decision right now to
No.
just copy and paste.
right. So we're actually I think it's similar to the way this was done in the last round of land development code amendments. Staff will put together a draft like that of what's being proposed with the wording and all the details adjusted to be applicable to Essex Junction. You will review that, and there will be multiple rounds of review. But like right now, we're talking about, is this a good approach? Are there things to watch out for? Are there kind of fatal flaws that we should watch out for now before we kind of dive in and actually put the draft together?
I have to admit, I did not read every single page of
And that's fine.
Sign regulation, but I agree with Diane. I liked the layout. I liked the fact that there were examples, including the building I used to work in Burlington, Howard Opera House. So I think in general and principle, I agree that that's a good format. And I do think it's easy for somebody who's putting up a sign to just go there and say, okay, this is exactly what I need to do. It's much easier than trying to read it.
I think something to consider also is, as we seem to be an increasing density within the city, that when we look at lighted signs and how big lighted signs might be, or how bright, or the times that they can be on, would be very important.
I went into Burlington's because I was trying to figure out some of the lighted part, because we were talking about holiday lights, and I went, we don't really have that here, so I wanted to see what they had. And it's like, yes, holiday period. So they defined it as November, December, and January as being, I'm like, okay, yes, that would cover. My neighbors had this beautiful display that I really enjoyed, and and it was for Diwali. So it's, yes, it covers the period of the high holidays where lights might be involved. Because if you go in the rest of it, it probably talks about swimming pools and not having the lights. Or in the case we had years ago, we had somebody having a skating rink in their backyard. The lights were flooding into somebody's bedroom. Yeah, it gets into be a bad situation. So I like the way they define things, because that's what we're talking about, is how they've defined. They're saying the same thing we are. It's just that theirs was better wordsmith than what we have. The intent's the same. It's just
So and I think there's the part that is likely the part that offers us the most enforcement issues right now is it's actually not the permanent signs, but it's all the temporary signs that are put up. I think the rules that are in Burlington's zoning bylaw are functionally pretty similar to what we have, but we'll have to think about how to take care of the business needs of some people who some businesses who currently have signs that are not compliant, but they claim it would be a significant hardship not to have that. But yeah, those are details that I'll point out the next time, when I show you the a draft of this. If there are any kind of forks in the road and choices to be made in that regard, I'll bring those up.
I think to go exactly there with, in that area with the sandwich boards that seem to be permanent attachments to Pearl Street versus temporary as our regulations require them.
Right.
And I believe Burlington, and I know that South Burlington, having worked there, okay, have the business hours only requirements, which we too have. It seems to be a suggestion in our ordinance until we actually get into enforcement. So I know that South Burlington has enforcement. I was late one day, and my manager said, "You were late," and I said, "How did you know?" She says, "We got a ticket." So needless to say, I locked up and moved the sign quicker than the next time. So it's, I think we need to figure out why are they there? Why is the occurrence happening now? Because I recognize that some places that they have a little sign like this versus actually having the sandwich board. Yeah, the sandwich board gives them more, okay, especially if they're in the back of some of our business areas. That, yeah, there's a reason why the non-compliance is happening. So is there a way to, have, not that, get the mission and get things in compliance? I mean, quite frankly, I'd rather have them go with, even if they're out there, and yes, they're, many yards away from where the front door is. But even if we could get them to do it by just business hours, and not when I'm out riding my bike at 6 a.m. and they're not open yet, sort of thing. It's, I guess it's, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're not trying to KO our business community, but we are trying to have things look neat, orderly, and that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, right. I think the permanent signage regulations help in that regard. A well-crafted set of permanent signage regulations allows businesses to show the world that they exist, without having to skirt the rules with the with temporary signage. This is partially an enforcement issue as well. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to enforce something that is that you have to be active outside of business hours, but it's not impossible. But we have been doing some outreach with the businesses along Pearl Street. I think one additional challenge we see the most kind of signage clutter around the more auto-oriented developments with big setbacks. The big lots mall, the one across. The other strip malls where there are businesses kind of around the back as well, but there's no way you could see that they even exist unless you're already driving in there, or unless there's extra signs up front. I think we have to we have to have something that's workable for those businesses for now, and I also think that in the long run, we should maybe discourage that type of developments if there's a denser, more walkable styles of development. So that's entirely possible, where we won't get the same issues anymore. So I guess the feedback that I'm looking for at this point is really just like, do you like the Burlington one, or do you like the Manchester one, which is a little shorter, but I think it's not as well like annotated and organized, in my opinion. There was an interesting thing that they require where they require people who have certain types of temporary signs to register online through just like a Google form. I don't really want to do that because it's meaningless unless that is attached to it to enforcement. But if you have opinions about anything like that, I'm happy to hear it right now.
Well, this, I'd say for the most cases that you'd see what signs were out there. I know that years ago, there were people who had yard sales on a regular basis. It became their second job. And the village at the time cracked down on them, saying, you're doing this as a second job. This isn't an occasional thing. So, but they would have signs, say, come to my yard sale, come from the main drag and come into the various developments. But if the sign was out there forever, people who were working for the village, of course, would see that after a while, going, that sign has been there for a while. So it was, I agree with you. Trying to have it registered, I mean, we would, it's it would be incredible, but we have approval of signs as it is when it comes to, let's say, the fairgrounds having an event. They have their marquee and whatever goes up. I don't know that we have to approve that they're having something because it rotates on a regular basis. I don't see them putting, signs in the ground anymore. They've got their permanent thing. But for somebody who's got, was it Big Lot, Walmart, they posted signs throughout Pearl Street for somebody not even in our community. They were saying, hey, drive their sales to that store that was having a big sale. Would it be beneficial for them for that circumstance, to register that we know that they're not just littering Pearl Street? I'm not sure how to deal with that. I would have to be something, because it's not in our sign requirements right now. You have to be a business, and it's got to be somewhat in
Right.
the community sort of thing.
The rules are different depending on if you are, like, even our own rules and but also the Burlington's right now are different depending on if you're putting up a temporary sign on your own property or on private property versus public property. It's a lot tight. Like there are a lot more requirements for public property, and the advertising that signs that we see in the right of way are not allowed, and we public works will go around and take them
Yes.
once in a while, and we do that.
Yes, I hear about the signs missing about elections because somebody put or didn't ask the homeowner. Put one in the front yard just because
Right.
it was on the main drag.
To answer your question, I don't think you need a Google form, and I like Burlington.
I think something that clearly communicates all of the standards, like the tables you were kind of showing for each different type of sign.
Yeah.
Something that's easy for whoever's putting the sign up to understand, and for the DRB or the zoning. But I don't know, whoever's enforcing it.
Yeah.
There's the zoning administration, the DRB. But
You might think, though, for people that are putting up a permanent sign and investing money in that, somehow to not get approval, but, you know, make sure that they're compliant before they actually install the sign.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, permanent signs already require
Approval.
yeah, they have to
Okay.
have a drawing and
Okay,
actually, yeah,
that's-
they need a zoning permit, so
Alright.
that would continue to be the same.
All right.
Probably subject for future conversation. If we go with the Burlington version, it's our model. There's just a piece in there about mural, and I'm wondering if we can maybe be more flexible than what they currently list in terms of what kind of a wall it could be placed on, and whether or not it could be illuminated. Obviously, we haven't gotten there yet, but we have had conversations about increasing public art
Yeah.
in the city, and some of the examples of other, like Burlington has a lot of great public art, but some of the other art that you can see around the state or the region, some of that is done on like main streets, and the current language and Burlington circulation seems to discourage that. Just very minor.
Yeah, the last public art that I remember was over on the Amtrak station.
Hmm.
And a bunch of high schoolers had painted the wall there, so when people came in, they saw this wonderful artwork that high schoolers had done. And I don't know if it was lit up or not, but having lights there might have been a good thing. In hindsight, it might not have been graffitied so quickly.
So Elijah, are you referring to these 2 points? Basically, there's a point about how they murals are allowed if they're on a secondary frontage or non-street facing side or rear elevation, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and is not illuminated. Okay.
So I was just curious if we adopt the
Yeah,
Burlington version, if it would be possible for us to either amend or remove
Right.
in order to make it possible. Like, let's say if circumstances necessitated it, someone could have a mural
Right.
on a main street.
Right. I think the only thing to be careful of is you can't really really say what is a mural and what is not. So like, you know, there's some guidelines
They're
over here.
attempting to say, yeah.
Right. They're attempting that, but if you have just graffiti on the, you know,
yeah, I'm reading this and I'm reading it that graffiti counts as a mural.
right.
Yeah.
Like how do you shape the rules so that graffiti is just like bad, basically bad graffiti is not allowed, but something that is nice is, right?
Or you could permit it. You could
Right,
permit
and-
murals as opposed to
Right.
just allowing.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that so this ties into a subject that has already come up about how to encourage more public art, and not that we want to ordinance things to death, but you know, just thinking through like
Yeah.
how if we know we are interested in encouraging public art, then how are we going to do that in order to encourage things that as a community, and I mean, maybe we could have a shred or something like, what do we consider art? What kind of art do we want? Like South Burlington's painted boxes is a fun idea that has already come up. But how do we then discourage, or how do we, not have a situation where me as a 14-year-old paints on a wall and then like,
Maybe we can require permits, but make it free.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like, yeah.
But
So you just have to
something
approve
where
it.
the
Yeah.
design has to be approved in
Right.
advance.
in which
Right.
South
Yeah.
Burlington, like,
Well, the
energy box
design couldn't be
examples,
Oh, yeah, their
Right.
boxes are fantastic.
The design couldn't be approved.
Well, they have to submit a design. They could submit a squiggly
Yeah.
If they draw if they show us how they're gonna draw the graffiti and then they actually do it.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't say no as long as they meet
Yeah.
other requirements. But I think if it's not so straightforward that anybody with a spray bottle of spray paint can just change the face of a building, I think
they
there I think it will work.
They've been practicing over 17 Park Street for a long time. I mean, some of them are pretty good, some of it isn't. So, I mean, it's just how they do.
It's art, but
Yeah, I mean, you know, so, it was entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of number 2 is their attempt to
say what is and what isn't.
code out graffiti,
Right.
or at least to say that graffiti on the front of a building would not be considered a mural. I think
Right.
that's kind of seems to be their attempt at that.
But there are buildings in the county that I have seen, someone has built a sunrise, is it purple or is it yellow? I forget what, there's 2 of them, that they have sunrises on the sides of buildings. I think there's one up on Main Street here, and I know that there's this lovely one, on Colchester Avenue in Burlington, that is that, I guess it is the sides of the building as opposed to the front, but what happens if somebody, you know, did a bit of Jerry's and,
Yeah.
and, you know, they painted that building, you know, was that building, it wasn't graffiti, it was sort of a mural, when they painted the front of the building there on the garage, years ago. I mean, they had, well, the entire building was painted. So would that count as a mural? Okay, I don't know. I mean, it was artistically done.
Something that
We-
also. Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
I think we can write this in a way where anything that like there's a category of things you can do which don't require a permit at all, and then there's a category of things that you can do with the permit, and then there's a category of things you just can't do. I think that, you know, anything that is beyond, you know, what's kind of manageable without permits, we would require kind of pre-approval, but still allow. So I think that sounds like what you're describing.
Something that's interesting to me that just stood out, that this is Burlington, right? That they are writing does not contain advertising copy, symbols, lettering, logos, or other such recognized branding related to products. That seems that would not be neutral. That seems to me that they're saying what can and cannot be on the mural, which
That is possible. Yeah. That is something when we put ours together, I'll check with our municipal attorney. Is there anything else to generally, you know, be cognizant of before we move forward with drafting version of this?
We'll see it again, so.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
okay. Moving on to C, potential land development code amendments memo.
So, I think I can also put this up on the screen. So basically, if we are going to open up the land development code, which we will, we might as well do a few more things. But at the same time, we have to be a little bit careful in in setting the scope of what we're doing here, because we aren't doing this with the help of CCRPC this time. We are doing this in-house, and things could take very long if we bite off more than we can chew. The other things to be aware of in deciding what to include in the scope of the set of land development code amendments is what other moving parts there are. One of them, as we all know, is a vision and strategic action plan project. I think we'll get a report out of that in the spring of 2024. And that is likely to reveal some policy and program priorities that our residents are really interested in, and it could be a good input for the LDC amendment process. So basically, anything you decide now, you can still change your mind, or you don't have to really fully like finish prioritizing the list tonight.
Chris, may I interrupt? Because, I mean, yes, there's timelines, but is there a timeline for the amendments to the LDC? Is there, because we could have many different sets of amendments going on. Is there a timeline, since we've been informed that they'd like to have signs done shortly? And I know that there's a certain month period that we have to go through. Are we willing to wait until the TOD and the other are done, or take them as a different slice at a different time?
So I think, I think there, if we just do what, if we keep this reasonably small, I think it will still take a year to implementation, basically. We will definitely have input from the strategic plan, by the time we get to even thinking about anything beyond signs. But the TOD project is a long project. We're not going to get results for like 2 years. Or we're not going to get final results for 2 years, and that itself, I think, is worthy of just. I think those are going to be LDC amendments, and it might be a major one. So I think this is an opportunity to do something that's, anything we want to do before that. I think that's going to be the next round that we think of, and I think this is an interim fix that we can do.
No more curiosity, what do we think we can put in round one?
Yeah, that's right. So I think we got a list of things that some suggestions that we have to consider, but we're also open to ideas that the commission has in general to think about. And the way I've organized this, we've got our own topics that the two topics assign the sign content neutrality, and we're gonna go through and fix things based on state statute and do some technical fixes. I think those are not gonna be controversial, but like we might as well do them, and then we can probably manage to fit in two more large topics. Yep.
I like your list.
Mm-hmm.
My priorities are, I guess it would be 2 and 3 or 3 and 4. The EV charging and the LED, green building codes, incentives, and I think, I'm not sure what's going to come up in the strategic plan, but housing affordability was a high priority. So I'm assuming that'll be a high priority, but I'd like to see more green building within the city.
Well, I did some research and some background research and gathering and stuff on LEED and other municipal green building incentives. Just as a side note on EV charging, here we just kind of mentioned like it's kind of an important thing that is coming up and becoming more prevalent in future years and more common. But between the time of making this agenda and meeting, I came across a recent update in the Vermont Housing Energy Code, which included, here, let me find the
Vermont Building Energy
Vermont Building
Code or standard.
Yeah, it was in the handbook for residential stuff. Yeah, which had a provision for multifamily developments with more than 10 dwelling units. 4% of parking spaces must provide either level 1 or level 2 charge, and then defining, of course, level 1 and level 2 charging capabilities. So
they have a choice between level 1 or level 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of the council meetings last year, I think it was last year, Raj, when he saw the first LDC draft, he said, why don't we have EV charging? So I think that would be a priority for the council as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if we were to do something about EV charging, I think we would be asking for a little bit beyond what the building efficiency standards ask for, because level 1 charging is this wall plug.
Yeah, I was gonna
Doesn't-
say I
doesn't do
I
any-
would recommend requesting only level 2.
Right. So, and I think we would probably be looking at municipalities who have just recently adopted EV charging standards, and probably
Yeah.
taking their wording and tweaking as needed as well.
Right.
But in terms of staff time, EV charging and signs
Mhm.
are relatively easy. The lead thing and green building codes, I think, would be a lot more substantial.
That one is a lot more complicated.
But I think that would be a nice priority.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about it now. So there's a lot of different requirements, and I also tried to find other municipalities of about the same, population, the communities around the same size, or assumably the same amount of staff, to be able to handle those kinds of issues, and I didn't have any luck. So mostly what I found was in larger cities, larger municipalities, places like Seattle, Chicago, Bellevue, and Burlington, just to look at some examples that they have. But still, we don't have to do the exact same thing as them. We can take it and scale it to our capacity of like what we can handle. But just for some examples, Burlington requires buildings over a certain square footage to have a third party commissioned to engineer the building envelope and make sure that reaches some building efficiency standards. If it's over 500 square feet, and this is both in the forum districts, it has to have LEED Gold certification, which the certifications go, I believe it's green, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, getting increasingly more strict. But there's a lot of other third-party standards and guidelines to go for. LEED is one of the most common ones that I've seen, and that I personally know a lot more about. I've run into other things with pedal or net zero energy, passive house certification, sustainable sites initiative, and some municipalities which have their own specific qualifications to meet. But what it seems to be is the theme of like, okay, if you meet these qualifications, you get some kind of extra feature for development. Things like the common incentives that I found were expedited permitting, which wouldn't really qualify as much here because our permitting process
It's pretty fast
is
already.
pretty fast. But like for the cities that use it, like Seattle and Chicago, their permitting process is a lot slower. It's a lot more complicated. So makes sense there. Financial incentives, so property tax credits. That one was for Baltimore County, Maryland, had things like that. High performance homes tax credits, things like that. Bellevue, Washington allowed alternative materials, specifically ones that were maybe a little more experimental, but had some kind of proven record to be more sustainable in some way or another. They also had a stormwater fee reduction, which stormwater fees or sewer fees and things like that are fees that have recently changed in our LDC, and I could see developers being concerned about the size of fee, and so that might drive them to make more energy efficient buildings if they get a reduced fee on that one. And then miscellaneous ones that don't really apply as much. Arlington County, Virginia, and Bloomington, Minnesota. Let me see. Allowed an additional floor or increased floor area ratio, and we don't use floor area ratio. That's mandated density areas and stuff. An additional floor, we're already kind of dealing with additional floor possibilities. So it's one of those things of like, would this be a separate thing? Could they, yeah. So there's a lot of potential of just seeing what other municipalities have done and then trying to figure out what is applicable to what we can actually do. Yeah, so there's a lot of different systems you can use and a lot of different incentives to offer. It's a very complicated issue, but definitely worthwhile.
So hearing your staff constraints and financial constraints of the city, my suggestion would be that you take the easy ones and get them out of the way but you take these that you're talking about and make sure they get into the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Because my concern about, which I get to express tomorrow in the steering committee meeting, is that the strategic plan might not get to the level of detail that we need to have the what would you call it? Have the priorities set out clearly of what the staff wants to see done. So I would just suggest if this is a priority for you, as it is for me, that we make sure it gets into the vision and strategic plan.
Yeah, and I think, based on what kind of priority list we see come out of our discussion here, we might be spending some time looking at green building standards or incentives, but find that there's not that much that is feasible within this round of land development code amendments, but that we could change some of our practices to leverage existing processes. Like one of the things that we noticed was that the residential building energy standards ask for a lot of things, but right now it's pretty lax in terms of we don't really know that they're being done. We ask for certificates of the RBES certificates, but the state doesn't necessarily check the engineering drawings. We could ask for a little more detail, for we can ask for a little more details in the site plan approval. Doesn't mean that it's bulletproof, but it's that could be something that comes out of our investigation here.
Well, I was going to ask if there was, I know that there's some state programs about dealing with energy efficiency and whatnot. So is there some way of dovetailing some of their initiative or taking it next step with us? Is that saying, hey, here's these pieces and there, I mean, and just actually make it reality, not just something the state said that would be nice.
So possibly, I think the most effective thing that I came across was an example where they listed a whole bunch of like green building kind of steps to make their building more efficient, and then they would outline in different columns. These are required by the city. Here's the specific wording of what is required and why and all that stuff. And then they would also have a whole bunch of suggested things. So it's like, hey, we don't require this, but here's the thing to think about. Like, we suggest you doing this to make your building more efficient. And then in the sections for why, it would include links to grants or possible funding sources of like, we don't know if this will be applicable to your project, but this it could be. It's worth looking into. And so getting together kind of like a what was it? I found a good example of that for kind of a green building. The word is escaping right now, but kind of like a suggested list of standards, like not necessarily standards, but just kind of building suggestions to kind of follow as like an outline with a whole bunch of different steps and resources all kind of compiled in one place. I think that would be really helpful.
Well, regardless, I think this is a longer term project activity.
Yes.
And what the state probably needs to do is think about an Act 47 for climate change.
Yes.
They have the Heat Act, which they passed, which is not anywhere similar to this, but you either have to force people to do it or incentivize people to do it. And if they could get a bonus for doing it somehow down the road, either through grants or some other mechanism, not necessarily provided by the city, but some other mechanism, that would be helpful. I think the code would just outline requirements for doing it if you're going to do it. Not necessarily you have to do it.
Right.
Yeah, I think along those lines, Scott, just like in terms of recognizing that this would be a longer term project, I'm also interested in it. Also interested in the EV charging. it sounds like there's the potential to cannibalize or integrate work that other municipalities have already done on the subject. That's exciting. If, as you kind of indicated in your memo, if we're trying to kind of maybe pick two that we're going to add, in addition to the two that you've already prioritized in terms of sign content neutrality and state statute consistency. I'm kind of curious. Well, I guess it's not a state statute, but the planned unit development issue that you have raised, that seems like if we have this just inherent inconsistency in the existing LDC,
So I don't. Yeah.
and we have been engaged in all of this conversation around the need for additional housing, the need for wanting to encourage that. If we've got something that's kind of hamstringing an initiative in terms of encouraging planned unit development in the existing LDC, to me that just seems like something, and you have noted that it's a high priority that we might want to consider in this inclusion in this kind of first round, just to like kind of work out that kink.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to know how a building could be a PUD. Because because a PUD is talking about a plan for a set of units. And I think of a multi-story residential building as being a unit, one unit. Unless it's let's not get into a series of them. But then that would qualify if it was a series of multi-story units. In other words, they're going to put up more than one. But last time we had more than one, it's down that way. And so, in fact, I don't even know if they're done building them down that way. So it's, that would make sense. But if it's singletons, like 17 Park Street, it sounds like it's a singleton. It's not a series of buildings. It's one. Yes, it's definitely a planned development, but it's not PUD.
So I'm going to step back a moment over here, just about our process over here and what would be useful for us. I think it would be useful not just to figure out your top two priorities, but to kind of have a rank list, because I don't know how far we can get. Right? I mean, some things could turn out to be easier, and some things just could be really difficult, and we might end up having to not find anything that we could do. So a kind of prioritized list, including anything else that you might want, would be very helpful. And this list doesn't necessarily have to be developed tonight. You could use feedback from the strategic planning process to feed into it. Now, in terms of the planned unit development definition, I don't think there's anything in statute that says it has to be multiple little units. I think PUD rules were meant to offer flexibility in case because a lot of municipalities had zoning regulations that were, even in their own minds, much too restrictive, and was stifling innovation. So it was kind of a band-aid solution to fix the shortcomings of some municipalities' zoning regulations. And in this case, the problem that we had was actually a recent application along Pearl Street in the highway arterial district, which I would say is the kind of more outdated kind of districts with too much setback requirements, in my opinion, relative to what's beside it. So this developer didn't want to meet those setback requirements. They didn't seem to make sense. They were able to offer a much more, greater variety of housing of up to three. Like they had from studios to three bedroom units that were being offered, but they couldn't do it if they had to, follow the setbacks. So they were asking to do a planned unit development, but technically it didn't work. Technically, you could. We don't have our PUD requirements does not allow for multi-story right now. And although it sounds weird that it's a single building that's applying, that's looking to be a PUD. there's nothing in statute that prevents us from changing those for the rules so that they could also take advantage of this flexibility. But of course, if you could just fix the underlying issue, the PUDs might not be so necessary altogether.
I think it's valuable to take a look at that PUD amendment. I think when we were updating the LDC and we were talking about PUDs, it was my understanding that when PUDs were first introduced, it was to incentivize developers to have more interesting spaces or spaces that people would want to live in. And if I'm reading, and I'm just reading this, that's what's written here for the PUD of the, having an outdoor space, yard, deck, or similar, that is the point of a PUD, is that you're having a developer create something that has this space for people. You're not saying that, yeah, you can do a PUD that is just a box with units in it. You can do and if this is the only issue, and obviously we can dig into it, but I'm reading here, if you can do a multi-story if you have decks,
Right.
balconies,
Right.
that fit the requirement.
Right, just not 750 square feet. That would be
Yeah, that's
that'd be a
pretty
little
big.
much.
Yeah, that's nice. But I'm just saying that my understanding, the idea of a PUD is an interesting space that is not just a box or not just an apartment building. But I think it's valuable to go back and look at it and have these discussions.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm going, how can this work? How could it? Yes, but you're right. Yeah, that was the whole point, was to be allowances for creative development, and that people wanted to live in it. It wasn't the cookie cutter,
Mhm.
one house in every 10 acres. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, of course, we don't have that capabilities here, but I mean, it's, but on the other hand, Village Center District allows a lot of creativity with, it's, when you get away from there, that creativity isn't required or incented. I don't know, I'd be curious to see what the incentive would be to get somebody to be creative.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at that, I can think of other ways that we could incentivize, that in multi-story buildings, that maybe you couldn't do that. There's other ways we can do it, but so important to have that conversation. I think I'd be interested in that. I do want to ask, it's not on the list, but I'm curious where inclusionary zoning has fallen. I don't know if that's stalled with the housing committee that isn't formed or hasn't formed yet. I don't know. I'm just curious where that is, because that would be on my list as far as something to work on getting into the LDC.
Yeah. So inclusionary zoning. I mean, the interesting thing is, while during the since it was last talked about, now we have state-led inclusionary zoning, which we are among the first municipalities to implement. Are you talking about an additional additional
you're talking
incentive
about-
or even more?
You're talking about the
Act 47.
Act 47 that provides an extra
Right,
story.
that we already have.
No, I'm talking about, we had presentations about inclusionary zoning that requires every development to have affordability. We had a presentation from the housing, from, I can't remember her name, but she was the chair of the housing commission. I don't remember that. And we were in the talks, and then it was kind of put on the back burner for the rental registry, and I'm not sure if the future housing commission was going to pick it back up. That would be on my list. If we don't have anything to work on it, we don't have to. It's not going to be prioritized, but.
So some of these things, I mean, it's like the same thing with the lead stuff, is we have sort of a chicken and egg, kind of waiting to see what happens out of the strategic plan. And we don't have a housing committee set up yet, and we don't know what their agenda is going to look like. So what I'm hoping to get out of the strategic plan, since housing was one of the highest things identified in the think tank, is that they're going to say housing strategy and plan would be a a key element of what needs to be developed. And the housing committee then would say, okay, we need to develop a housing strategy and plan, which would include recommendations on X, Y, Z. And then you can talk about that. That would be, to me, a logical sort of sequence, as opposed to us trying to take the lead on that before.
Sure, yeah. I just wasn't
Basically, if we revisit this in a few months, by the time we finish dealing with the sign regulations and the technical fixes, we'll have more clarity from the strategic plan to figure out what the next steps are. I mean, at this point, it's more like it would, you know, I appreciate having the feedback on what generally you think is important, and if you have any additional things, and you know, it sounds like that could potentially be another thing on the list to consider. Yeah.
I agree with Phil. I think that it's important to include it in the minutes.
Yeah.
But that, waiting for
Yeah.
what comes out of the housing committee.
Then I would say, I mean, it seems like some of the low hanging fruit then beyond the sign content neutrality and the state statute stuff would be the EV charging, the PUD
Yeah.
thing. That's some of the low hanging fruit that
Yeah.
could be put into maybe even one or two meetings.
Yeah.
And I agree, like lead is important, but it's a big project, so keeping that out there.
Well, what I'm
And
hoping
then in
also.
a couple months, seeing what comes out of the strategic plan.
Yeah, I'm hoping also that we can get a pillar out of the strategic plan related to climate change and environment. So far, that hasn't risen to the top, but I'm hoping that we get something out of that.
Yeah, I think just to like keep this thread going, given all of ours as a commission or committee, so planning commission, for expressed interest in public input, and I think that the strategic plan, for whatever limitations it may have, this is like our best chance, at least for the moment, of getting, trying to act with some degree of public input as like a guiding resource. And so I'm absolutely on board with, again, I agree, getting a prioritized list in the minutes, but holding off until we get hopefully several pillars out of the strategic planning process to then finalize.
But I agree with what Phil prioritizes, low hanging fruit. Those are things you guys can probably get done relatively quickly, or through us.
Right?
Any thoughts on this on the issues with the HA districts? Actually, this was an interesting thing that we were trying to expand the neighborhood development area, and they were telling us that it's probably not gonna work to extend it all the way out there, partially because of the name of the highway arterial district and the implications of that, and how it doesn't align with the goals of the neighborhood development area.
I have no clue why it was named that. It was named that even before I came on the commission. Or, so it's one of these strange little pieces. I mean, the idea of having an area that's away from, across on the other side of the tracks from where all the residential pieces are. So you have this strip mall of a highway. But you can't put a strip mall on. It's supposed to be biking and trains and buses and such, but no cars, so unless you live like where I do and you walk up and down the street because you have to, it's how do you get more people there? Well, yes, there's now, I think, one or two developments that are going in, which will have more people, but it's like, it needs to get reworked because it's not working.
So I think it's very likely that this will get reworked in the TOD study. Now I think my question is like, are you open to kind of a quick fix right now, or knowing that it's probably going to be changed again in 2 years, like comprehensively, because I think we might go towards something that's more like a form-based code along the whole Pearl Street corridor. But
Sorry, what does that mean?
form-based code is a kind of different way of doing zoning that prescribes more that has very specific requirements for design and height, but like and how it steps back towards the lower density areas, but how the buildings interface with the street. It's like it's very clearly prescribed, but it's made so that once you check those boxes, approval is very like much quicker and easier, and it's supposed to be more predictable, and it's what Winooski has along its main corridors, and for a lot of developments, Winooski doesn't. The developers that propose multi-story buildings along the form-based code corridors don't even need to go through DRB approval because it's just staff approval because they have met these very specific requirements. So we're likely going to move towards something like that, which that's the point of the TOD study. But in the meantime, I don't know how long they'll take. We don't have to call the highway arterial district the highway arterial district, and we could make some minor changes to something that makes a little more sense, in my opinion.
It's kind of an interesting sort of thing in that right now it's a mix of businesses and residential.
Mhm.
There is no mix of business with residential. It's either business or it's residential. There is no, it's not like the downtown here where we have a mix of both. You have that piece. It literally is, it's a strange little unit out there. And yes, we've had applications just for historical perspective that developers said, no, this is too much for us to wrangle to try to do this. Okay. Because you have to have a storefront or the front of a business on the street, and they wanted side of a business on the street. It's like, no, you've got to at least look like you've got the front of the business on the street, and they backed out, when they heard that we were going to be serious about it. So, how do you some new perspective on this thing? Because it's not, like I said, it's either business or it's residential. They're not mixed. They're next door to each other, but they're not really mixed.
Well, also the highway arterial, just to be clear, highway arterial district is next to the transit oriented district, but it is not the same, and it is quite kind of polar opposites for sort of no reason. The highway arterial district is the only place that allows large drive-throughs and like basically McDonald's and KFCs and things like that. But I think it's not optimized to be that much of a kind of a neighborhood and a good walkable place.
Right.
So just to be clear, there's two things you have in this. You have renaming it, which seems to have been an issue when looking at the neighborhood development area, when expanding the neighborhood development area.
Mm-hmm.
You were told that name's probably not going to be great.
Right.
But at the same time, the expansion goes through the transit-oriented development. Mm-hmm. But you didn't hear that name would be an issue. Mm-hmm. Just to be clear, I'm just clarifying the two things here. So there's renaming it, which to me seems like could be a very easy thing if we wanted to do it. And then you have rezoning, which I'm hearing would be potentially making it more like a neighboring zone.
Yeah.
Or reworking it altogether.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
And so then the question, if that's a correct assessment, based on the feedback you got around the expansion of the neighborhood development area, understanding that the TOD study isn't going to be available, but is likely going to affect whatever interim change we make, if we were to simply rename the highway arterial district, is that a major or the only impediment to, let's say, getting approved for the neighborhood development area in the interim before the TOD study is finalized, things change.
We wouldn't know. We wouldn't know. We're not the ones to decide.
Okay.
But based on the feedback that we got, that's one of the impediments. I think there are functional impediments as well. Like what's the purpose of the highway arterial district and some of the contents of what we regulate is like inherently pedestrian unfriendly. And that goes against kind of the ethos of the NDA designation. So, I mean, there could be some, along with the name change, there could be some, minor fixes that could be done along the way, if we're interested.
So I guess and so this I made more of a clarification. Understanding that it's hypotheticals at this point, but given that an outcome of the TOD study is likely to rework this piece of naming zoning in some way, other than the fact that this has been brought up that this is an impediment, but one of multiple impediments, is it a worthwhile project in the short term, anticipating that it's going to become larger, more drastic changes are going to be likely coming out of the TOD study? It's just a question of priority. Like,
right.
Is it worth doing in the short term?
I mean,
You asked us.
Right. That is sort of what I asked you. But also the my take on it is that there's a certain amount of, we don't want to put in a ton of work and make a lot of complicated changes knowing that it will be redone. But there are some simple changes that could be done as long as we don't think that those changes, being in place for just a couple of years, will be too confusing, for some reason, because they'll be changed again.
For the neighborhood development expansion application, do they look at the actual zoning regulations in those zones that are being applied for?
They look at the purpose of it. There's a narrative that you have to write. And I think, Jennifer, like, do you know exactly, like, do they actually look at them?
They also request that you submit pieces of the code referring to what types of buildings are allowed.
And it's like,
It seems like it would make the most sense to do very minimal changes that would make the zone more attractive to the application. And that obviously do not go against anything that we want to do in that area, but that then, that would help us get the extent or the development area
If the
expansion.
if the NDA is extended, does Act 47 then apply to the NDA?
Act 47 applies everywhere.
Everywhere. It's not just the NDA.
No.
Oh, I thought, okay. I thought it was just,
I think it's everywhere.
Is that-
Everywhere served.
oh, I thought, okay. I thought it was just.
I think it's everywhere.
Is that-
Everywhere served by sewer, right?
Yeah,
Which is
water
all
and
of
sewer,
the city.
water and sewer, which is the whole
Water,
city.
Which is the
Okay.
whole city.
Yeah,
So,
Almost
other
all
question,
the city.
yeah.
so the other question,
There's a couple spots.
the TOD study, you say it's likely to revamp zoning along the corridor and form-based code, but you also mentioned that the NDA is supposed to be more pedestrian and bike-friendly, is that correct?
That's one of the stated objectives of the zoning. I mean that the NDA designation.
But that's not pedestrian and bike-friendly now.
Are you talking about the highway arterial? Well, right. It's all relative, and the bar is not particularly high, at the statewide level, because plenty of places in Vermont are not very pedestrian friendly. I think in terms of what we're trying to do, like that, at least the TOD district is trying to make it more pedestrian friendly for sure. There are a lot of things that make that, anything along that corridor, in my opinion, a good candidate, particularly the frequency of a transit that serves it right now. A bus that comes every 20 minutes is as frequent as it gets in Vermont.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it would put us in a slightly better position, and I think maybe functionally, if there are a few things in there that can be tweaked to be more pedestrian friendly. I mean, like we might see, we might open the door to some better results in the interim, if we do a little bit of work on here. But yeah, I think it's likely to totally change in after the TOD study.
So are we saying that this is a good idea? Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I having. I mean, you sound like you have had the most exposure to the state's kind of opinions on this. I mean, I would be surprised if we just by changing a name and then they're still looking at how we're zoning it. They're gonna be like, oh yeah, you're good to go, neighborhood development. But I mean, if it's not a lot of work and you professionals think that it's worth a shot, and if we're then yeah, I'm on board with that.
I think at the very minimum, if we believe that area is, if we believe the corridor, the Pearl Street corridor is not, we don't want it to be kind of a highway arterial function. I think at least it sends a message to developers that we're looking for innovation here. We're looking for things that would be better for pedestrian and transit access.
Yeah.
Right?
What the heck? Well, the HA district is, I can see it from my house, so it's, well, there's 185 houses back in my neighborhood that are behind that shopping mall and apartment buildings and such that are there. I mean, I'm looking at it, going, what am I really talking about? And I'm like, oh yeah, shopping mall, the TOD is really the shopping center plus the buildings across, and some parts of that have residential buildings in it at the moment with very long spaghetti lots. And I could see how somebody might take a couple lots and want to put something else on it, but they'd have to get it rezoned to get that feasible. Yeah, I can see that. It's just like there's a new apartment building going in within sight of my house. I'm waiting for the trees to come down, unfortunately. And but yeah, like I said, it's either houses, it was houses, okay? It's either houses or it's business. Most of it's business. I can tell you when the trash is picked up in the morning. I can hear it. It doesn't comply with our regulations. I'm in constant conversation, please not. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of odd because across the street, well, actually, I guess across Pearl Street is included too. I mean, it's a strip of green space that goes right next to the railroad. So, and I believe that land's owned by the city. And then because you've got the green there, and then you've got railroad, and then you've got the little green strip of land. And it's best 30 feet wide. So it's the physical layout is not, it's kind of not really, what do you do with this strip of land? Other than people had houses on it, people put businesses on it.
Yeah, I think functionally there's a lot of flexibility for what you can do on that. On that, in terms of land use, you're allowed to build all sorts of things there. It's just the dimensional requirements are a little bit onerous. I think setbacks and whatnot, especially when just just beside it, you've got places you got regulations where we're saying that you have to have no set or very minimal setback. We want buildings right up to the street so that it's more compact kind of a area. Not proposing that we make major changes. It's more like in the interim, it could be some minor tweaks just to get us some benefits.
So I was looking at your schedule here,
Yep.
and it looks like you have places in here for 2 topics to be addressed this year.
More or less, yeah.
Okay, so you're asking us to prioritize those topics, correct?
Yes, and I guess I don't need a full answer for how that is done, until because we're gonna start by working on sign content neutrality.
Right.
But yeah, I am asking for prioritization.
So the low hanging fruit is sign neutrality, sign content neutrality, the PUD, correct? Existing commercial minimum parking requirements. Is that low hanging fruit or not?
Well, it depends how it could be. It depends how controversial you think that is. I certainly some municipalities have just straight up said we're no longer going to have minimums and we're going to change everything to recommendations. Some have even said that we're going to make the maximums. But also there's some municipalities are understandably hesitant to do that because of the potential impacts on neighboring properties. Yeah, it might not be a quick fix if you think it's going to be controversial.
Yeah. So you got 3 then left, right?
Mhm.
You got sign content.
The EV charging was one we said was
EV charging.
And
What about the renaming the
The
HAD?
then we also, I'm assuming that the state, of our 2 kind of predetermined assignments, the state statute, consistency, technical fixes.
Yeah, we're
I'm
gonna
imagining that.
right.
They're already included.
Yeah.
when does the sorry to interrupt here.
No, that's okay.
When does the NDA expansion application? When does that all have to be done? Because
So we can apply for it at any time.
Okay.
It's a monthly.
okay, that's right.
So yeah, anytime that you apply, there's the application is due at the first Monday of the month, and then the meeting is towards the end of the month, and that's when they decide if you qualify or not.
Okay.
Originally, I was getting all the documents together and planning to apply for January. So like January at the earliest, I could have everything ready. But if we want to wait until after we rename the HA district, if
yeah.
it's possible, then
I don't think we should wait.
yeah, then I could possibly delay the NDA expansion thing. But if we're still going to try to apply in January, then renaming it HA district would be
Yeah, and we can just do it again.
Yeah.
If once it's
Okay.
through. Yeah.
So we're not okay. That makes more sense. So we're not waiting to apply, but
I don't think we
so
should.
we could potentially get it and then not have to worry about renaming it or doing anything until the TOD
exactly.
study.
Right, that is possible.
Potentially,
That is possible if we're very lucky.
yeah. Because I'm just thinking the timeline. We have to make the changes. Then we have a hearing. Then it goes to the council.
Yeah.
They have the hearing.
Yeah.
Then it goes. And then it's
But the sooner we apply for
Yeah.
TDA, the better. So that neighborhood development area.
I mean, I didn't want to wait until the TOT study is done because of the 2 chunks being next door to each other. When it talks about rezoning, might be better to be informed as to how one chunk is being looked at versus the other chunk.
Wait, sorry, you're saying you want to wait or you don't want to wait?
I do want to wait. I want to have as much information about that TOD and HA area, because if we end up, I can envision that it might lend itself to have it zoned the whole strip. That
Mhm.
piece. That's one zoning area versus 2.
Yep.
And that might uncomplicate some of this complicated, who knows what to do with it thing. So, and that might lend itself to a better naming of it and reason area. But I think we'd have to look at what's there now, what's the viability of things staying there, as opposed to, imagine anything would be starting off with bare earth there. Things would have to come down.
Yeah.
Businesses would have to move or whatever. We started in that area.
I mean, I we're not talking about the additional topic 1 until February, right?
Yeah.
And
This is in addition to the sign.
amendments in March.
Yeah.
If we're doing EV charging or PUD, then we probably wouldn't even be talking about
No,
this until
We,
June.
in fact, we could swap a few
More
things here too.
information.
We get the state statute consistency at technical fixes. We could swap that to be a little earlier to get some more time to think of, like, to get results from the strategic plan.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that if we're talking about PUDs and EV charging,
Yeah.
as the first,
Oh, right.
we would inherently be waiting a while before we
Right.
got to this anyway.
Yeah.
and so
Right,
we'd
right.
have more information.
Yeah, so I'm just saying,
Yeah.
put it in the back burner, and we'll get to that one.
Okay. Yep. I think that's
I
fair.
mean, let's be informed as much as we can, before we dive into that one.
All right.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Any-
I was just
anything
gonna
else
say,
on this?
so
Yeah.
since there's just the other topics, it was already brought up actually when we were talking about signs, but and again, I'm interested to see what comes out of visioning work that's ongoing. But since we've been talking about it, public art, I think that is, I don't know if that's something that we wait until we do the rewrite for the LDC, and we look for kind of cross-cutting opportunities, kind of encourage that in the rewrite, or I was just realizing when I was talking about murals that we're specifically talking about signage, there are likely other parts of the LDC that could come into play on that subject, and then on kind of public art works or initiatives more generally. But I think just in terms of like community building and creating a more, I don't know, everything from attractive to familiar to spaces that people have the opportunity to engage with. Those are all things that I think are through lines through many of our conversations. And so since we're just putting things in the list, again, understanding that there's just to memorial, I would appreciate it.
I think that'd be good. And also, I mean, I can certainly have that as a list of things to think about. But also, if you see examples of zoning regulations that somehow encourage public art, I mean, I would love to know. I mean, the possibilities are so broad; it's actually a little bit hard for me to imagine how that would fit into zoning. But if you see anything good, let's discuss it.
Are you guys familiar with Leake Street in London? It's an underground passageway that's open to creative art ad hoc. So it's basically painting with anything you want on the walls of the tunnel.
Oh, that's fun.
It's fascinating because you walk through and you see artists constantly changing things.
I had something similar when I lived in Austin. There was a graffiti park where it was a construction site that had been abandoned. It was marginally safe, but the community kind of took over and started to like spray paint it, and then the city kind of designated like, okay, that's okay. This is a park now. Anyone can come. Anyone can spray paint on the slabs of concrete, wall and floors. And every time you go, everything's different because you just paint over what's there.
Yeah,
it was an interesting
what it's
thing.
done is it's limited the ad hoc graffiti in other parts of the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
All right.
useless information.
Fun thing to know.
No such thing. Moving. Anything else on C? Moving on.
Any
to
public? We we have a member of the public here. I don't know if
Any public comments that like to be made?
Just trying to play catch up after all these years. You're talking about housing, multiple units. Where are you gonna build them?
so it's where, well, I mean, we have a set of zoning regulations and different zones that allow for different levels of
You gotta, it's gonna be built on something. We don't have any more open space.
Mhm.
Everything is built, we're just a little tiny community.
right.
We don't have any land space. What little bit we have, the benefit to the health of the public would be to leave it open space.
So I mean, if it's relevant to your question, we have our zoning map available that shows you the different types of the different zones that there are. You are allowed to build different densities in different parts of the city. I think the city's constantly changing. We've got properties that get bought up and redeveloped. Sometimes we got strip malls that one day might not be strip malls. We're not talking about open space, and there's also open space that is protected in perpetuity, like what you see, in green over here. At least based on zoning regulations. So that's, I mean, that I don't know if that's that answers your
Well,
question at all.
It does, it helps, but
Yeah.
just how dense do we want to jam people into? Essex Junction shouldn't be required or to solve Chittenden County's housing dilemmas.
I don't think we're solving it all on our own. I think we're doing a part to solve it. To your point, we don't have a lot of open space, but most of the space we have is privately owned, and the property owners can decide to build on that property based on the regulations we're
Some of that's
creating.
floodplain.
And we have regulations as well that say what can be built and can't be built on floodplains as well.
Yeah, we have a floodplain zone actually, and actually you're pretty much not allowed to build anything on the floodplain zone.
Have you thought of say like a 2-year moratorium on expansion as opposed to tearing down, for lack of a better word, junk housing and just replacing on that location?
It's not part of a current plan. I could see that being worse for residents. A moratorium on expansion would make housing more unaffordable if you reduce the supply.
I don't think there's any such thing as affordable housing. I don't think it exists
I don't think it exists much these days either.
unless you got $500,000 to
Yeah.
just to get on board with. Some of these houses are selling for, what was it, down in Indian Acres, or somebody put up a house for sale and he's asking for $1 million or something like that.
Yeah, and a lot of these problems stem from supply and demand. The supply is very low, and so it's very expensive to get them. So our part is trying to make conscientious development so that we can expand the supply of housing. So I encourage you to look at the LDC, check out some of the codes that we have in place, and yeah,
Well,
That's-
there's all
that's
that.
our job.
I'm sure you're doing a good job here, but what I'm saying is we don't have additional land. We're confined to what we're already at. And I don't think our first responsibility is to a good life of the citizens of this community. That's our first, if not our only consideration.
I agree with that.
Well, it's just something to think about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you for the input. Moving on to number 6, members updates. Any updates from members of the commission?
I'll tell you what I know about what's happening with the strategic plan, and Chris can add to that. There's a steering committee meeting tomorrow. The last meeting, it was decided that survey number 1 will be extended till the end of the year. Survey number 2 will start in January. Online survey. I'm not sure exactly what's going to be in the online survey number 2. There will be at the end of the month 2 events. There will be open house where they're going to try to gather citizen participation in the pillars that have been identified so far, pillars of the strategy. And then they're going to have focus group discussions starting the 28th, I think, through the 30th. And tomorrow, I think we'll iron out what the focus groups will look like, what stakeholders will be involved, and so on. Also, there was no capital project committee meeting this month, so I have nothing to report on.
Right. Moving on. Oh, yep.
Oh, I went to the senior luncheon today, Rotary put on. Planning commission comment was when I walked in the door, gentleman was speaking to Regina about sandwich boards. So I encourage him to come chat with us or give us a note. But people are concerned more about where the tax rate's going to go with the announcement of the tax department and the school districts, a possible 18%. So people are more concerned about their taxes going up. But I thought I'd share that because that does apply to development and such. But it was interesting to get, as I walk into the door, yeah, how about those sandwich boards? So it's, the topic's still out there.
All right. Moving on. Any staff updates?
We are so the rental registry and inspection program is going to be considered like the next version of the bylaw will be considered by council and potentially warned for public hearing in January. They will be looking at it during their December 20th meeting and potentially warning it for adoption in January. Yeah, that's it for me. Jennifer, you have anything?
Just what I mentioned before about the neighborhood development area, planning to apply for it in January unless otherwise delayed. Just waiting on a couple last documents to put together and, fill out all the application letters, stuff like that. That's the main thing.
Great. Right. Done.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned 8:35 p.m.